John lived alone at the edge of Mars Sector 7, where broken buildings and silence ruled the land. The old mining town had been empty for years, just dust, wind, and rusted machines that groaned in the cold night. John liked it this way. No people. No noise, no memories. He had seen too much in the war. He just wanted peace now. The air was sharp that night. The red storm clouds rolled across the sky like angry waves. Inside his shelter, a small metal cube buried halfway into the sand, John sat beside a weak heater. He chewed dry food and drank warm water. His eyes were tired. The silence was deep. Until knock knock, defroze. No one ever came here. No one should even know he lived in this forgotten corner of the galaxy. He waited. Knock knock, again. This time, softer, slower. As if whoever was outside was weak or scared, John grabbed his old plasma rifle. He moved to the door quietly. It could be a scavenger, a bounty hunter, or something worse. He opened the metal door just a few inches, then stopped. Outside stood a tall alien woman, her skin a soft gray blue, her hair tangled and wet with frost. She was wrapped in dirty cloth and old blankets. Her body shook from the cold. Behind her, two small alien children stared at him with wide, glowing eyes. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said softly. Her voice cracked like broken glass. John didn't say a word. He just looked at her. I have nowhere else to go," she whispered. "My children haven't eaten in 2 days. Please." She hesitated, then looked down in shame. Her hands trembled as she pulled the blanket tighter around her. "I will warm your bed, human, if you let us stay. And my children need a father." The words hit John like a stone. Not because she begged, but because she didn't. She was not pleading to be saved. She was offering something, anything, to keep her children alive. John looked at the little ones. Their faces were thin, their arms wrapped around each other, their feet bare on the icy ground. He lowered his weapon. "Get inside," he said. The woman gave a small nod and guided the children through the door. John quickly shut it behind them. The wind howled outside like a ghost. The children didn't speak. They sat on the floor, huddled together. The woman stayed standing, unsure where to go. John pointed to the heater. "Sit near the heat. You'll freeze over there." She obeyed, gently moving the children closer to the warmth. "What's your name?" he asked. The woman looked at him, eyes filled with exhaustion. I cannot say." "Why not?" "If you don't know my name," she said quietly, "you can say you never helped me." John understood. She was running from something. Maybe from people. Maybe from her past. He didn't press her. Instead, he opened a sealed drawer and took out 2 protein bars. He gave them to the children. They looked up at him, unsure at first, then quickly took the food with shaking hands. They ate slowly, as if afraid it would vanish. "I only have enough for tonight," John said. "Tomorrow I'll find more." The woman lowered her head. "Thank you." He looked at her again. Her cheeks were bruised. There were cuts on her arms. One of her fingers was wrapped in old cloth, stained dark. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She nodded. "But I can still work. I'll clean, cook, or whatever you want." "I didn't ask for a servant," John replied. "I'm asking if you need help." That made her blink. She hadn't heard kindness in a long time. Gave her a clean towel, some water, and a soft mat to sleep on. She refused the mat at first, but he insisted. That night, she lay beside her children near the heater. John sat awake, watching them. He didn't understand what made him open the cough door. Maybe it was the look in her eyes. Maybe it was the way she spoke, honest, proud but tired. Or maybe he was tired too. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was full of quiet breathing, soft whispers, and the small sound of children finally sleeping in safety. John closed his eyes, but just before he drifted off, beep beep. The outer sensor picked up a signal. Someone was nearby, not the wind, not an animal. A ship had landed somewhere close, and if they were searching, they'd be looking for someone, and she was hiding in his home. The next morning, frost coated the windows of John's shelter like silver veins. A quiet stillness sat in the air, but underneath it, John's instincts whispered danger. He hadn't slept much. That signal on the sensor last night wasn't just background noise. Something or someone was nearby. But for now, there was another priority. The two alien children were awake, wrapped in the emergency blanket John had given them. They sat beside the heater, their big eyes scanning everything silently. Their faces were cleaner now, their skin less pale. But their fear hadn't left. John handed them a warm drink made from powdered berries. The younger one took it carefully. Hands shaking, the older child whispered, "Thank you." John gave a small nod. Then his eyes moved to their mother. She had cleaned her face, wiped the dirt from her arms, and covered herself in the brown cloak John had given her. But her eyes still carried the weight of running, of loss, of hunger. She stood in a corner of the room, still unsure of her place. John broke the silence. "You didn't sleep." She looked down. "Mothers sleep last." "You still won't tell me your name?" "No," she said softly. "Names carry stories, and some stories bring danger." John didn't argue. He walked over to the panel and checked the outer scanner again. The signal from last night had disappeared. But he knew better. They could be cloaked, watching, waiting. He turned back to her. "Who's after you?" Her lips tightened. Then she moved closer to the heater, letting the warmth touch her fingers before she spoke. "My people used to live on Varnax. Moon, a peaceful place. Quiet farms, families. My husband died 2 winters ago. He was a farmer, not a fighter. But when the raiders came, he chose to stand. They took everything." Her voice cracked at the memory, but she held herself steady. "I escaped with my children. Many didn't. Some were taken to the slave ships. Others were left behind. I've been running for 8 months, hiding, trading scrap for food, doing anything I could." She looked John in the eye now. "Even offering myself, if it meant my children would live." There was no shame in her voice, only honesty. John sat across from her. "Why come here? Why risk walking into my door?" "Because I heard stories." She looked at him curiously. "A man who lived alone in the red zone, who once helped fight the collectors, but left after something happened. They say he doesn't kill anymore." John's jaw clenched. Memories burned at the edge of his mind. He didn't like thinking about the war, about what he did. About who he used to be. "People talk too much," he said flatly. She gave a small smile. "Maybe, but they were right." John said nothing. He got up and opened a side hatch in the wall, pulling out a bundle of wrapped food blocks. He handed her one. She broke it in half, giving the first bite to her children. As the kids ate, John asked, "You called yourself a widow last night. What was his name?" She looked down at the floor. "Carell. He was strong, kind, not a warrior, but brave. He built our house with his own hands. He taught our son how to plant seedlings. He would have died 1,000 times to save them." She paused, and he did. The room went silent. After a moment, she looked up again. "You remind me of him, not your face. Your silence, your strength. You could have sent us away. But you didn't." John looked toward the door. "I'm not him." "No," she said. "But you're not the kind of man who leaves a child out in the frost." That struck something deep inside John. Something he thought had died long ago. The older child walked up to him with a small piece of the food bar. He held it out. "You hungry, mister?" John didn't take it. He just looked at the little one, surprised. The mother blinked, touched by the gesture. "They haven't spoken to anyone in months." "I guess I'm lucky," John said quietly. The Moment was cut short by a high-pitched beep from the console. John moved fast. His heart dropped as he checked the scanner again. A ship had landed. Not far, and it was military class. No ID signal. No broadcast. Silent entry. He turned to the alien woman. Get the children into the storage bay. Now. She didn't ask questions. She picked up her children and followed him to the side hatch where old water drums and crates were stored. He helped them climb in and covered them with old fabrics. Before closing the hatch, she grabbed his hand. If they find me, she said, her voice shaking, don't let them take my children. John nodded once. They won't. She looked at him, then whispered for the first time, my name is Lyrian. Then she vanished into the shadows. Outside, the metal scanner beeped again. Footsteps approached. John stood frozen, rifle in hand, eyes locked on the motion tracker. One blinking red dot. Close. Too close. Outside, the howling wind had stopped. That silence, the wrong kind, meant someone was here. Someone trained. Someone hunting Dot in the hidden storage bay beneath his floor. Lyran and her children stayed quiet, tucked between old cargo tarps and metal crates. Every breath they took was a risk. John turned off the overhead lights. Darkness settled like a blanket. He moved to the corner and knelt, pulling up the floor panel near the heat duct. He slid out a dusty metal case and opened it. Inside were a few leftover smoke mines, EMP nails, and an old breathing mask. He hadn't used these things since the war, but his past had found him. Again. Suddenly a soft buzz. A drone had hovered outside the window, scanning with blue light. John ducked and crawled below the window line, grabbing a black curtain and pulling it across the glass. The drone paused, blinked once, and moved on. John exhaled slowly. They're not kicking in the door, not yet. That meant they weren't sure. They were searching, testing. His heater was still on. Heat readings could give them away. He slid over to the console and reduced the heater's power to 20%. The air grew colder immediately. He shivered, but didn't care. They'd survive the chill. He just needed time. Lyran's voice came from the floor grate, barely a whisper. Are they here? Yes, he whispered back. Stay quiet. Don't come out unless I tell you. There was a pause, then her soft reply. Be careful. John looked around his small shelter. There were only 2 exits. One was locked from the outside. The other was the main door, and someone was already near it. He turned on the scanner again and watched the dot move slowly away, circling, looking. They weren't just here by accident. They were tracking her. An hour passed. The drone didn't return. But John didn't relax. He sat near the door, rifle ready, listening, thinking. Finally, when the signal vanished from his scanner, he opened the hidden panel and helped Lyrian and her children out. They were shivering. The little girl coughed softly. They didn't find you, John said. They will, Lyran whispered. If they're here, they know I'm close. John looked at the 2 children. Pale faces, thin arms, trembling fingers. They can't stay in that hole again, he muttered. We've hidden before, she said quietly. We'll do it again. No, John said, standing up. This isn't survival. This is waiting to die. He went to the cabinet and took out the last 3 ration blocks. Then he looked at the heater, barely warm now. He'd have to make a choice. If he turned the heat up, drones might track the thermal signature. If he didn't, the children might freeze tonight. He turned to Lyran. How long can they last in cold like this? She hesitated. Not long. John looked at her again. Her hands were shaking, her eyes hollow with exhaustion, but her back still straight. She would keep pushing until her body gave up. He reached into the wall compartment and pulled out a small roll of heating wire. It was old tech, mostly used for keeping pipes warm in the war camps. He rolled it out across the floor, looped it under the blankets, and connected it to a low battery cell. The wire glowed dim red. The warmth returned, just enough to keep the frost away. The children cuddled together. Slowly, they fell asleep. John sat across from Liren. "You don't have to warm my bed," he said softly. "You already gave me something I forgot I needed." She blinked. "What?" "Purpose." She didn't answer, but she sat down beside him, shoulder touching his. Her hand brushed against his fingers. Neither of them moved away that night. As the cold crept back and the red Martian wind screamed outside, John stayed awake. He watched the door, watched the window, watched the children breathe safely under the blanket. He didn't know if they'd survive another visit from the hunters. Didn't know if he could keep them alive. But he would try, even if it cost him everything. Outside in the distance, a small blue beacon flickered in the storm. They would return. But this time, they'd meet someone ready. The next morning, there was no sun, only the red sky burning above the dusty horizon. The wind was quiet, but something about the silence felt wrong. John stepped out of the shelter alone. He scanned the area. No footprints, no scorch marks from engines. But deep in his bones, he felt it. They were watching. He returned inside and locked the door tight. Liren was tending to the children, gently rubbing a salve made from crushed desert plants onto their skin. The little girl coughed softly. Her cheeks were warm, too warm. Fever. John cursed under his breath. The nearest clinic was 2 domes away, but he couldn't risk taking them out there. Not while someone hunted her. "I need medicine," he said aloud. Liren looked at him quickly. "It's fine. I've treated worse." John shook his head. "She's burning up. You can't fix this with herbs." There was one option left. Dangerous, risky, but possible. Smugglers. Row, a black market supply line buried beneath the sand. Outlaws, ex-soldiers, and traders who dealt in banned tech, stolen meds and secrets. John hadn't seen them in years. But they knew him. More importantly, they owed him. 1 hour later, he covered his face with an old scarf and put on his desert cloak. He took a backpack, hid a sidearm under his coat, and opened the storage hatch beneath the floor. "You're leaving?" Liren asked quietly. "Just for a few hours. I'll bring medicine and food." Her eyes filled with fear. What if they come back? He knelt beside her and gently took her hand. "You're stronger than you think. You've kept them alive this long. Keep the hatch sealed. Don't open the door, no matter what." She swallowed. "And if they find us?" John hesitated. "Then they'll learn," he said. "What happens when you corner a man with nothing left to lose." He turned to leave, but just before stepping out, she whispered, "John." He looked back. "If you don't return," she said, voice trembling, "I want you to know. You gave me back something I thought I had lost." "What's that?" "Hope." John didn't respond, but his eyes softened. Then he stepped out into the red wind. Smugglers. Row was buried beneath a broken transport hangar 5 kilometers east. The sand had swallowed most of the building, but the right knock on a certain metal plate still opened the way. John knocked twice, paused, then knocked 3 more times. A voice growled behind a rusted speaker. "This area's closed, stranger." John replied, "Then tell Hask the ghost of Tarian Ridge just walked in." There was a long pause, then a loud clank. The door opened. Inside, the air was hot and thick with smoke. Lights flickered above crates of stolen tech and cracked cargo pods. Men and women stared at him, quiet. Some remembered his face. Others saw only his gun. He found Hask sitting behind a bar of scrap metal. "You look like you've been dragged by a sand beast." Hask grinned. "Need fever meds for a child." Hask raised an eyebrow. "You don't have children." "Not mine," John said. "But they're under my roof now." Hask leaned forward. "You're risking exposure for a child? That's not like you." "I didn't come here for advice," John said. "Just the meds." Hask chuckled and tossed a small vial toward him. "You're a strange one, Ghost, but I'll help you for old time's sake." As John turned to leave, Hass called out, "Watch your back. Word is, bounty ships are sweeping Sector 7, looking for a female alien and 2 kids." John's grip on the vial tightened. "They say she's dangerous, wanted by 3 systems." John looked over his shoulder. "She's not dangerous," he said. "She's a mother." Back at the shelter, the wind had picked up again. Inside, Liren held her daughter close while her son stared at the door, afraid it would open. But it didn't. It stayed closed until hours later, when the code beeped and the door unlocked. John returned, covered in dust, tired but alive. He knelt beside the little girl and gently placed the vial in Lorraine's hand. "Twice a day, small drops." Liren stared at him. "You came back." John gave a tired smile. "I said I would." She looked like she wanted to say more, but instead, she lowered her head and whispered, "Thank you." He sat beside her as the girl slowly began to breathe easier. Outside, the storm howled again, but inside there was quiet. And just as John closed his eyes to rest, boom! A loud knock shook the door. Not soft, not gentle. Authoritative. A voice boomed through the speaker. "This is the Dominion Patrol. Open the door, now." John stood slowly, eyes narrowing. Beside him, Liren whispered, "It's them." He looked at her, then at the children, then he reached for his gun. The knock echoed through the shelter like thunder. Not 1, not 2, but 3 heavy slams, followed by the cold, commanding voice of a Dominion patrol officer. "Open the door. We detected heat signatures inside. You are harboring fugitives. This is your final warning." John stood still, gun in hand. Mind racing. His heart pounded, but not out of fear for himself, at least. He looked down at the children huddled beneath the table, their eyes wide, hands over their ears. Liren stood, frozen, her back pressed against the wall. Her lips didn't move, but her eyes begged him. "Don't let them take us." John exhaled slowly, then activated his old military console. The scanner confirmed it. 3 men outside. 1 drone overhead. He switched on the outer speaker. "This is a private dwelling," he said calmly. "You have no authority in this zone. No one here fits your search." There was a long pause, then a laugh. "You're in dead land, old man," the voice replied. "Law is what we bring with us. We're scanning again. If we get 1 more hit, we're coming in." The signal blinked red again. They were preparing to breach. John turned off the speaker. "Into the tank, now." Liren moved fast, grabbing her children and slipping into the hidden bay. She looked up at him just before he sealed the hatch. "Don't get hurt." He didn't answer. He just locked it and stood up straight. Then he walked to the door and opened it. 3 armored patrolmen stood on his porch, their faces hidden behind metal masks. Behind them, the drone hovered like a silent vulture. The lead officer raised a blaster. "Step aside. We'll scan the building." John didn't flinch. "Scan me." "What?" I said. "Scan me." "You said you detected heat signatures? I'm 1 man, 1 heater, 1 life reading. You think I'm smuggling a whole crew under this roof?" The second officer checked a handheld scanner. "Only 1 reading. It's true. Just him." The third narrowed his eyes. "Then why did the drone show more?" John pointed up. "That drone tech? It's junk. Picks up heat echoes from days ago. I cook. I walk around. I sleep in different corners. It leaves traces." They didn't move. So he stepped closer. "I used to run with the 21st Outer Division," he said slowly. "I know what you're doing. I've seen it before. You're hunting the helpless for a paycheck." He dropped his tone. "But not here. Not in my house." There was a heavy silence. Finally, the lead officer raised his hand to call off the drone. "Next time, turn off your damn heater." They walked off into the dust storm without another word. John shut the door, locked it, and for a few seconds just stood still. He felt like his breath had been held for an hour. Finally, he opened the hatch. Liren crawled out, pulling the kids up with her. She looked at him, her chest rising and falling fast. "You didn't let them in." "No." "You could have." "I didn't." She stepped forward. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with relief, and something more. She looked at him differently now, not as a stranger, but as something steady, a wall she could lean on. A warmth that didn't come from fire. She didn't say thank you. This time, she just stood close to him, close enough that he could hear her heart beating. Later that night, after the children fell asleep beside the heater, Liren sat beside John in silence. A candle flickered on the table. Dust floated in the warm air. "I owe you more than I can say," she whispered. "You don't owe me anything," John said. "They were just doing their job. I just did mine." She looked at him. "You think I'm just a job to you?" He blinked, then slowly turned his head. "No, you're not." They sat there a while longer. The silence wasn't heavy. It was calm. Safe. Lyra and finally spoke again. "On my world, when a man shelters a widow and her children, even without touching her, we say he has already become her bondmate." John gave a dry chuckle. "That happen often?" "Not anymore," she said softly. "Most men won't risk themselves for broken women." "You're not broken," John said quickly. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I am, but you treat me like I'm not, and that's the first time I felt whole in a long time." John didn't answer. Instead, he did something simple. He reached across the small table and held her hand. Liren stared at him. Her fingers curled slowly around his. She didn't pull away. That night, she didn't ask to warm his bed. She simply laid beside him, close enough to hear his breathing, to feel his heartbeat slow. Her body trembled not from fear, but from feeling safe. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. Her head rested against his arm. His hand stayed wrapped around hers out in silence. A bond formed, not through words, not through survival, but through quiet choice. The night passed too quietly. And quiet, on Mars Sector 7, was never a good sign. John woke to a strange sound. Not loud. Not sudden. Just a dry, shallow cough. He opened his eyes and found the little girl curled against Lorraine's chest, her face pale and damp. Her tiny shoulders shook with each breath. Her skin was hot to the touch. "She's worse," Liren said, voice tight with fear. John sat up and placed his hand on the girl's forehead. The fever had spiked. "She needs stronger meds," he muttered. "The dose I brought wasn't enough." "There's no more?" Liren asked. "Not here," he replied. "I'd have to go back to Smuggler's Row, but I don't think I'll make it this time." Lorraine's eyes widened. "Why?" John stepped to the scanner and checked the logs. Motion. Multiple heat signatures. No signal IDs. They were cloaked. "There." "Back," he said. She clutched her daughter tighter. "How long?" "They landed last night. No knock this time. No drone. This time they're not searching." He looked at her. "They're hunting." The air grew heavy. There was no time to run. No safe zone left. The child coughed harder. John moved quickly, loading the EMP nails into the wall triggers. He rewired the shelter's core to activate lockdown mode. He set thermal decoys outside using heat tape and old droid parts. Liren sat in the corner, rocking her daughter gently, humming in her alien tongue. Her son clung to her side. His eyes locked on John. "You're not afraid?" the boy asked. John knelt beside him. "I used to be. But now I've got someone to protect. Are we yours now?" The boy whispered. John didn't speak for a moment. Then he nodded. "Yes." By afternoon, the sensors blinked red again. John looked at Liren. "They're here." She didn't flinch. "What do we do?" she asked. John opened the cabinet and pulled out 2 old metal rings. These, he said, are prototype ID dampeners. When worn, they make you invisible to most trackers. Not perfect, but enough to buy time. He gave one to her, then knelt in front of her son and clipped the second around the boy's wrist. What about my daughter? Liren asked. She's too weak to wear one. Her body won't handle the tech. Liren stared at the child, sweating, breathing fast, burning. I'll stay with her, she said quietly. You take my son. No, John replied. They'll expect you to run. They won't expect a mother to stay behind while her child flees. They don't know you, John said. Liren touched his arm. You already gave us more than we deserve. I won't let my child die in a cold box. John's jaw clenched. Then I'll take all of you. He paused. I have one contact left. That night, under a pitch-black sky lit only by the glow of a nearby dust storm, John sent out a signal, a single encrypted burst aimed at an outland freighter 2 sectors away, a contact he hadn't spoken to in years, a favor he swore he'd never use. The reply came 10 minutes later. One word, owed. The extraction was set, but it wouldn't be easy. As the wind howled, John wrapped the little girl in his only thermal blanket and carried her in his arms. Liren held her son's hand. Her steps were steady, even as her legs trembled with fear. John led them through the back exit tunnel beneath the shelter, away from the eyes of the scanners. He placed heat bombs in their beds and left the heater running on max. It would fool them for just a few minutes. That was all they needed. As they reached the ridge, John stopped. A single black ship sat waiting, long, narrow, and nearly invisible in the night. The cargo door lowered slowly, revealing a dark figure. Inside, Ghost, the pilot said with a grin. Didn't think you were the family type. Times change, John replied. He turned to Liren. You trust me? She nodded without hesitation. He handed the girl to the pilot and helped Liren and her son board. Then he paused. He looked back toward the shelter, now just a shape in the distance. Then turned away. Just as the door began to close, boom. Blaster. Fire lit up the ridge. Dominion patrols. They had followed the trail after all. The pilot screamed, "Get down!" John turned and fired. A precise EMP shot struck the lead drone in midair, dropping it. Liren ducked with the children behind a crate. The blaster fire rained from both sides, but John didn't retreat. He stood at the ramp covering them until the last shot. Then he leaped on board. Go! He shouted. The cargo door slammed shut as the engines roared to life. Inside the ship, Liren wrapped her arms around John without a word. She didn't cry. She didn't speak, but when she looked at him, he saw it. Not fear, not shame, not survival, but something deeper. She had chosen him, and he had chosen her. The stars blinked softly outside the window of the freighter, moving past like slow fireflies. Inside the small medical bay, the little girl finally slept, her breathing steady, her fever gone. John stood quietly by the door, watching her. She had nearly died, but she hadn't, thanks to Liren's strength. Thanks to his decision, Liren sat beside the bed, brushing her daughter's hair with gentle fingers. Her son sat near her, finally at peace, playing with a small silver trinket John had given him, a tracking bead turned into a toy. The room was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was full of life, full of a strange warmth John hadn't felt in years. He stepped out into the hallway, needing air. Not oxygen, he had plenty of that, but space. Space to think. Space to feel. That's when Liren followed him. John, she said softly. He turned. She didn't speak right away. She just looked at him, long, searching, not with fear anymore. Not even with gratitude. But with something that made his chest feel heavy. Then, finally she spoke. You didn't have to do any of this, she said. I know. You could have let us freeze, or be taken, or left us the moment you saw the ship. I could have, he said. But I didn't. She stepped closer. Why? He hesitated, then answered with something he hadn't said out loud in years. Because I was already dead before you knocked on my door. Liren blinked. He went on slowly. I was breathing, walking, eating, but inside, empty. Then you came. And suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. I had someone to protect, to care for, to stay alive for. She reached up, placing her hand on his chest. You gave us safety. You gave me a reason, he said. They stood in silence again, but this time it was peaceful. Liren looked into his eyes. I told you on my world. When a man protects a widow and her children, he becomes part of her soul. He nodded. You did. Her voice grew quiet. Would you let me return the bond? He didn't need to answer. He just reached for her hand and pulled her gently into his arms. Later that night, the freighter touched down in a hidden valley on the edge of a habitable moon, one untouched by war, unknown to the Dominion, a place where old ghosts could rest and new lives could begin. It wasn't much. Just soil, sky, and silence. But for John, it was enough. He built a shelter from scrap and stone. Liren planted herbs from her world. The children played in the soft grass and laughed as if they had never cried. And each evening, as the stars returned, they would sit by the fire together, not as strangers, not as fugitives, but as a family. One night, as flames crackled low and the children slept nearby, Liren sat beside John, her head resting on his shoulder. You're not what I expected in a man, she whispered. Same, he replied. I didn't think I'd ever care again, but you proved me wrong. She smiled, then slowly she spoke again. If you still want me to warm your bed, I won't do it to repay you. John looked at her. Then why? She didn't blink. Because I want to. John didn't smile. He leaned in and kissed her, a quiet kiss. A simple one, but full of everything that had never been said. A bond was not made from blood. It was made from choice, from trust, from shared fire in a cold world. And as the stars watched from above, the man who once lived alone in the dust now lay beside a woman who once had nothing left, and together they had everything.